The ocean does not merely swallow objects, it translates them into a language of pressure and permanent shadow. For 73 years, the RMS Titanic existed only as a mathematical coordinate of failure, a ghost story whispered across the North Atlantic. Engineers insisted the hull was a fortress of steel, yet it vanished with such absolute finality that many believed the sea had ground it into unrecognizable silt. The conflict between Edwardian arrogance and the crushing reality of the abyss created a historical void that remained unfilled until 1985. We were told the ship was a monolith of iron, but when the first cameras finally pierced the darkness 12,000 feet down, they didn't find a monument. They found a crime scene frozen in a state of terminal decay, revealing that the unsinkable legend was actually a fragile shell held together by compromises we are only now beginning to measure. The discovery was never intended to be a search for a luxury liner. Dr. Robert Ballard was engaged in a classified Cold War mission to map the wreckage of two nuclear submarines, the USS Thresher and the USS Scorpion. The Titanic was a secondary objective, a needle in a vast mountainous haystack of the abyssal plain. Using the towed camera sled Argo, the team searched for a debris trail rather than the ship itself, following the logic that ocean currents would act as a natural sorter of wreckage. At 1:05 a.m. on September 1st, 1985, a single image flickered onto a grainy monitor, a massive riveted boiler. It was a piece of technology so specific to Olympic-class liners that silence fell instantly across the control room. This wasn't just a discovery, it was a confrontation with a tragedy that had transitioned from living memory into myth. The hull lay 2.5 miles down, split in two, surrounded by a debris field that stretched for miles, yet the ship's true nature remained shielded by the very environment that claimed it. It was a victory for science, but the images returning from the darkness suggested a far more violent end than the official 1912 inquiry had ever dared to record. The scale of the wreckage defies standard maritime comparison, presenting a landscape of industrial carnage that stretches across nearly a square mile. The bow and stern sit nearly 2,000 feet apart, separated by a chaotic graveyard of personal belongings and structural fragments. To understand the physics of what was found, one must account for the sheer force of a descent through 2.5 vertical miles of water. The bow section, still somewhat aerodynamic, slammed into the seafloor at an estimated 30 miles per hour, burying itself 60 feet into the sediment. The impact was so immense that it distorted the very frame of the ship, yet it remains hauntingly recognizable. The stern, however, tells a different story. It became a victim of catastrophic hydraulic pressure and trapped air. As it sank, the internal compartments did not merely flood, they imploded with the force of small explosions, shredding the steel and scattering the heavy reciprocating engines across the seabed like discarded machinery. Measurements taken by modern submersibles reveal that the steel, once thought to be the finest of its era, was actually compromised by a high sulfur content. In the freezing waters of the North Atlantic, the material underwent a ductile to brittle transition. It didn't bend under pressure, it shattered like glass. This technical detail redefines the entire narrative of the collision, suggesting that the iceberg didn't just cut the ship, it fractured the very integrity of the hull upon impact. Every 60 seconds in the deep, the environment exerts over 6,000 pounds of pressure on every square inch of a submersible's viewport. This is the reality of the Titanic's final resting place. The ship is not simply sitting underwater. It is being consumed by a unique iron-eating bacterium known as Halomonas Titanicae. This organism forms the rusticles, the orange icicle-like structures that drape over railings and portholes. These are not merely signs of decay, they are an active biological process. The bacteria are literally recycling the ship back into the ocean's ecosystem, consuming hundreds of pounds of iron every single day. Experts estimate that within the next few decades, the upper decks will collapse entirely, leaving behind only heavy machinery and non-organic debris. This creates a ticking clock for historians. If we do not document every rivet and artifact now, the ship may return to the dust of the earth before its secrets are fully understood. But as the iron disappears, something even more unsettling has been observed in the sediment. Objects that should have been destroyed remain eerily preserved. Amid the ruins of the grand staircase and the twisted iron of the promenade, explorers found something that challenges the logic of underwater decay. In several locations across the debris field, pairs of leather shoes lie side by side on the seafloor. There are no bones. There are no remnants of clothing. The calcium of the human skeleton dissolves at these depths within years, and fabric is consumed by scavengers almost immediately. Yet the tannins in the leather make the shoes unpalatable to deep-sea organisms. They remain as perfect silhouettes of the people who once wore them, ghostly markers of where bodies came to rest. It is a haunting realization that the debris field is not just a collection of artifacts, but a vast, invisible cemetery where the residents have vanished, leaving only their footprints in the sediment. However, near the stern, there is an anomaly, a debris pattern that defies expectation. A collection of heavy machinery appears to have been blown outward rather than crushed inward, suggesting an internal force that conventional sinking theories cannot fully explain. The full-scale 2022 digital scan of the wreck, constructed from over 700,000 individual images, revealed a detail that has sparked intense debate among naval architects. For over a century, the six-compartment rule dominated the explanation for the sinking, that the iceberg breached too many watertight sections. However, the high-resolution 3D models show no massive gash in the hull. Instead, they reveal a series of buckled plates and failed rivets. This supports a controversial theory. It wasn't the size of the damage that doomed the Titanic, but the failure of its connections. If the rivets had been of higher quality, the hull might have held, and the ship might have remained afloat long enough for the Carpathia to arrive. This shifts the blame from an act of nature to a series of subtle, cost-driven engineering decisions made in a Belfast shipyard. Yet this theory is complicated by evidence of intense heat. One alternative explanation focuses on a coal bunker fire that had been smoldering since the ship left Belfast. Historical records and thermal analysis suggest that a bulkhead near the impact zone may have been weakened for days, potentially accelerating the flooding. Another possibility is even more unsettling: structural failure due to expansion joints. Some researchers argue that the ship's design contained a critical flaw, causing it to break apart at the surface, not because of water pressure, but because the hull could not withstand the stress of its own length as it tilted. Each theory presents a different version of the disaster, one of misfortune, one of negligence, and one of fundamental design failure. But perhaps the most unsettling discovery is not on the ocean floor. It is the silence surrounding the data itself. There is a growing information blackout, driven by tension between private salvage operations and institutional control. The company holding exclusive salvage rights has been accused of selectively recovering artifacts that support a marketable narrative while withholding structural evidence that could suggest liability. Independent researchers have reported being denied access to high-resolution sonar data, often under the justification of site protection or cultural sensitivity. The controversy escalated over proposals to recover the Marconi wireless system. Publicly, the mission is framed as preservation. Privately, some believe it is a race to retrieve communication records, messages that may have never been intended for public knowledge. This is no longer just a historical inquiry. It is a dispute over ownership of truth. Some documents suggest that portions of the wreck may have been disturbed or altered during early undocumented dives, raising the possibility that the site we see today is not entirely untouched, but partially curated. Funding for deep-sea expeditions has increasingly become tied to media interests, prioritizing spectacle over scientific rigor. This has led to what some researchers call the commercialization of the abyss. There is growing concern that repeated visits to the wreck are not just observing its decay, but accelerating it. Mechanical disturbance and microbial transfer may be altering the site itself. We are now in a paradox, attempting to preserve history while actively contributing to its destruction. Those who control access claim they are protecting a grave site. Critics argue they are protecting unresolved accountability. As we move further into the 21st century, the Titanic is no longer just a shipwreck. It is becoming a reef, and eventually it will become nothing more than a stain of iron oxide on the Atlantic floor. This raises a deeper question. Why does this ship still hold such power over us? Thousands of wrecks lie in the same darkness, forgotten, but the Titanic endures. Perhaps because it represents the precise moment when human confidence in technological perfection collapsed. A reminder that no matter how advanced we believe ourselves to be, the natural world remains indifferent to status, wealth, and ambition. The disappearance of the Titanic's physical form is inevitable. But the questions it raised remain, persistent, unresolved, and increasingly sharp. If the ship reflected the society that built it, layered, confident, and convinced of its permanence, then what does our modern struggle to control its narrative reveal about us? Perhaps the most important discovery has yet to be made, not in steel or debris, but in understanding why the truth of its final moments remains so carefully guarded. As the structure weakens and the decks collapse, the Titanic continues to sink, not deeper into the ocean, but deeper into human mystery. The abyss does not hide answers. It waits until we are ready to confront the ones we fear.